Good morning, everybody. It's really nice to see all of you again for another, what I hope will be a great ECHO session. I'm really excited about the topic and our speakers this morning. We're going to talk about rebuilding relationships with families in the context of COVID-19, compassionate and proactive communication. I think this is really so relevant to all of us. I think most of us who work in long-term care, probably it's the relationship that drives most of what we do, and most of the pleasure that we get is from those relationships. And they've sure been strained over these last few months. So I'm sure we'll all have lots of observations and comments and stories as we go on. Let me introduce Raquel Meyer, who is our manager of our Baycrest Center for Learning, Research and Innovation, Danielle Galessiere, who's an educator, and Samantha Peck, the executive director of the Family Councils of Ontario. We're really excited to have all of you and all of your wisdom join us this morning for our ECHO session. So with that, I am going to mute myself and turn it over to all of you.
Great. So welcome, everyone. We're delighted to be here and to learn with you about how folks are managing and continuing their relationships with families during this very difficult time. And I am so pleased that Samantha Peck, the Executive Director of FCO, eagerly joined us to share her perspectives. She's learned a lot over the years in her role, and I think she's going to be really valuable to the conversation. We have no disclosures. And carry on, because we have no disclosures here, we have no bias here, and just to acknowledge that the views today do not represent those of our government. Thank you. All right, so we've all been engaged in this very evolving context. You know, as COVID has evolved and unfolded, visitor restrictions were put in place, and with rather abruptly and with real consequences for families and their loved ones and residents in terms of how they've been able to interact. And as it continues to evolve, and there is now discussion about reopening visitation and what that will look like, there are a lot of concerns and anxieties around that, and a lot of possibilities. The other thing that's been happening, of course, is that our Canadian Armed Forces put out the report about some of the Ontario homes that have been struggling around COVID as it's impacted them. And so that has also, raised concerns for families too, who are not able necessarily to see or ensure themselves of their loved ones' well-being. And so, Sam, you've had so many ongoing conversations with families. I just thought it would be really helpful to hear from you about, what has this context meant for families? How are they experiencing it, and what are their concerns?
Thank you. So I'm really happy to be here today. Families, this has been a huge change for them. It was an abrupt change in their life. Overnight, they were no longer allowed to see their resident. And as you know, there are many, many families who spent time every day at their loved one's home. They would be almost, members of your family, because you would see them so often. So this was an abrupt change in their life. Overnight, things changed drastically. Now, to be clear, most families understood and still understand the need for their visitor restriction to keep residents and staff safe. That didn't really make it easier emotionally. And you know that just the transition, that journey to long-term care is stressful for families. And then you add a layer of a global pandemic on top of that, and then not being able to see their loved one and getting a lot of information from the media. So that has created tension. On the one hand, they understand the need for the restriction. On the other hand, they're heartbroken. So some of the consequences were they were no longer able to provide care, things like assistance at mealtimes or psychosocial support. Families are no longer able to evaluate the quality and appropriateness of the care provided by staff. That oversight piece is something that many families take very seriously. They're partners in care, but they're also often the eyes and ears of what's happening in a home and the voice of their loved one. They couldn't evaluate the status or well-being of their loved one. People would try to do it through a window or through a FaceTime call, but it's not the same as seeing their person in the flesh. For some people, it's been an unprecedented separation from their loved one. the stories that break my heart the most are those who have a spouse in long-term care and will say, this is the longest we've been apart in our 30-year marriage, that I haven't been able to see my husband hold his hand, and it's breaking my heart. And so there's a lot of an emotional reaction. So fear, anxiety, grief. And because of that, some people took their loved one home. And that's very difficult. That's another source of tension, because people are living in long-term care because they need 24/7 nursing care. So it's a really difficult thing to do. And then you look at the lens of, we are all living through a collective trauma. For families, it's got another layer, because as caregivers, they are removed from the person whom they would be looking to support. Like, I can't imagine being separated from my husband right now. That would devastate me. Never mind being separated from someone who I'm responsible for overseeing their care. So there's isolation, there's a breakdown in that partnership that families have come to play out an important role in the long-term care community. There's also issues with communication and lack of support and so much uncertainty. So we've got this context that's changing from day to day, and those of us who work in the sector are a little bit perhaps more adept at wading through the government directives and regulations, but families don't have that background. So they're relying on us, and that's all of us who are on this call, to help support them through that. And then there's also folks for whom the recent race-based violence has an impact as well. So I just want to flag that as for some of your team members, your families, your residents who are hearing about what's happening in terms of anti-Black racism and violence. That's just another layer of grief and trauma right now, that they may be removed from their communities for whom they would ordinarily rely on for support through a day-to-day life, never mind then adding on a pandemic and widespread violence happening in North America and other places. So I can't possibly imagine what people are going through, and I'm trying to empathize and pull together those experiences. But it's been challenging for families.
Great. All right, we wanted to do some poll questions. So if you get your phones out, and we're going to do Menti questions. All right. So we're interested in hearing from you, and in a word or two, how have family communication needs changed since COVID-19? Interesting. So we have that kind of virtual tech piece, less of it, urgency, broken, it's difficult. Families want reassurance. Wonderful. Yeah, daily check-ins, FaceTime. Great. So they really have changed. Excellent. Sam, do you have any comments about that?
Basically, what we've been hearing, things have changed. Families want that reassurance. Reassurance can combat distrust. Increased use of tech can overcome some of those hard to communicate issues. But yeah, it's very, very much what we've been hearing for families.
Great. We have a second question for you, and we are wondering if your families have a designated contact person with whom they can connect with in the home. Okay. All right, so a bit of a mixed bag. That's great. I think it will be really interesting to take some time in our discussion today to share what's working and what you've tried and isn't working and what you've tried and does work. All of those things will be quite helpful. Today, we wanted to focus on sharing with you some resources that will promote communication and information sharing that will really support those relationships during this very difficult and particular time. So we have organized them in terms of resources that are targeted to families, then to staff, and then to homes. And so we're looking forward to really sharing that with you. And I'm going to turn it back over to Sam to introduce some of the Family Council Ontario resources.
Communication is the foundation of every part of your life, every relationship that you build. So what we're doing to help families navigate this experience, so we have a daily update newsletter, and as soon as the directive came out to restrict visitors in long-term care, we switched to doing a daily update. The reason being, families wanted or needed a regular touch point. So we were able to step in and provide them that regular expected communication, which is something that we've had very positive feedback on. So a key takeaway you might want to consider is, how do you have regular, consistent, reliable communications? It provides reassurance. Looking at peer support options, family councils are based on peer support. So we switched to a virtual environment where we host bi-weekly sessions. When we first started, we were doing, I think, 4 a week, but over time we've transitioned to less frequent to meet the needs of families. So we did a person-centered approach and adapted on the fly. And they can ask us questions and then just talk amongst their peers about what's going well, questions, concerns, and challenges. It's really just pivoting to a new way to connect with people. We are still going to celebrate Family Council Week. Those of you who are familiar with us, you know we have Family Council Week every year. The pandemic has changed our focus. It hasn't changed or removed the need to gather together and to recognize what's going well and to educate and network. So this year's theme is inspiring hope, resiliency, and change, because when families are well supported, they can do this work, and they can do this work with you. You can promote resilience amongst your peers and make that happen. We've got some specific resources and tools we developed to help families navigate. And so you'll see from right to left, we've got pandemic priorities, questions to ask, companion documents on information families want to know, and what we're calling a quick 10 checklist. These are because we heard from families that they're trying to figure out what to ask you as long-term care home staff. How do you virtually evaluate how your loved one's doing and the care being provided? So the quick 10 was what we started with, and that's to help families gather their thoughts. So what to ask the home to get a sense of what's going on when families can't be there in person. And so then we drill down a little bit more, expand it, and then have that pandemic priorities companion document. And this is all to help families navigate a situation they've never been in. To be fair, none of us have ever been through this, but families are living with a lot of the emotional challenges that come with. So these are documents to help them navigate the situation. We also developed a virtual visits toolkit with OARC and a group called Tech Coaches. And so we recognize that some homes across the province have been using tech to do virtual visits right at the onset of the pandemic or even before. But this toolkit was for those homes who aren't doing it or who weren't doing it. So provided information on how to organize, how to overcome barriers, and literally walking through, how do you use FaceTime? How do you use Zoom? How do you use these different tools in order to set up virtual visits between families and residents? So just for those who are like, I have no idea what to do, that's the tool for you. We also know that RNAO has pulled together a Facebook group to support families and friends of Ontario residents So there's lots of services and supports available to families that are out there and to help enable connection still.
Thank you, Sam. There's some really great information over there, and some of it ties in, so thank you for that. Clearly, in light of the current landscape with COVID-19, as well as the reports that came out on long-term care homes that was mentioned earlier by Raquel, the need, for staff and family members to build trust is even more important. So the fact that effective communication can go towards building that trust, it's supported by clear messaging and appropriate context, and followed by a confirmation of mutual understanding. These are some of the aspects that the tool that we would like to introduce you to today, designed for families, was created to support and to help with. Clearly, it's one of the pieces in the puzzle of building trust and relationship with family, but it can be a really effective tool for particularly looking at the fact that we're doing most of our conversation over the phone. We're also going to be introducing some other e-modules that the CLRI has created that look at staff and how we can actually better empower staff to respond to families in distress. The next slide, our body language, how we present ourselves physically can definitely fortify feelings of comfort and trust during an in-person conversation. And obviously we need to acknowledge that this aspect of communicating is not available on a phone conversation. And it just highlights and enhances the need for effective verbal and paraverbal communication. Again, paraverbal, just review, referring to the inflection and the tone of our voice and the pacing and phrasing that we use. If we go to the next slide, it was particularly actually because of this that this particular tool was created, the family communication tool for phone calls. It is a modified tool modified for phone use that was from an original tool that was used for in-person huddles that was created in a study that was mutually collaborated upon between the U of T, led by Dr. Lisa Crandley, and the Ontario CLRI and other various stakeholders. And so that tool has been modified again to be used over the phone. We're looking to get this tool out this month for access by families to be able to use. And so that's our goal. Right now, what I'd like to do is play the video that we have. This is a video demonstration that's actually part of the module for families. And you can see how they're using the tool in a phone conversation.
Oh, finally. I'm so glad that someone has picked up.
Sorry, I didn't catch your name.
This is Paul Chow. My mother, Rita Chow, is in room 501.
How can I help you, Mr. Chow?
I am really concerned about my mother, so I prepared a summary for you to make sure I am clear and effective in sharing what I need from the team. It will take me 1 to 2 minutes to read it to you now. Can you please take down a few notes to share with the rest of the care team after this conversation? The situation is that lately I have not been able to get through on the phone, and I am worried my mother is not being given a lactose-free diet since the outbreak started, which would cause her pain. The background is that before the outbreak started, I visited her daily and personally checked that her diet was being followed. It worries me greatly that her diet may not be being followed. She is living with dementia, so she can't keep track of what she is eating for herself. The action by the team is that no one has answered the phone since yesterday, when I started calling on an hourly basis until now. I recommend that my mom's care team and I make a plan for how to connect regularly by phone. I request that someone on the care team finds out if she is following her lactose-free diet, and then calls me back to confirm.
Mr. Chow, this is really helpful. As you suggested, I took some notes to share with the team, and just to confirm my understanding, I'll read you what I wrote down. You're concerned that your mother's lactose-free diet is not being followed, which is worrying you. You would like to make a plan with your mother's care team to connect regularly by phone and have someone on the team call you to confirm she is following her lactose-free diet. Is this accurate?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for calling and sharing this information. A member of the team will get back to you as soon as possible.
Very, very straightforward and purposely so. The tool was designed with some ideas in mind about how to support it. Particularly that we wanted to make sure that there was dedicated time for the family member to speak uninterrupted, that it gave permission to the staff member to just listen and actually write down some notes. These aspects are really important to developing trust because it allows the family member to know that they're heard, and it allows the staff member to not feel like they have to interject. They can focus on really taking down accurate notes. And at the end, being able to clarify what those notes are so they could move forward together, again, is a huge step. So if we look at the next slide, we'll see that that first question that is on that list for families to look at, so when they can describe their experience over the phone, is what is the situation you wish to discuss that is impacting you and or your loved one's care? And they're able to then, as a family member, take what might be multiple experiences or concerns and distill it down to one experience that they can share. And if we go, as you can see there, that we'll touch on a little bit. You can see the staff skill of what was used. We'll touch on a little bit on that at the end, but it's as simple as just saying, thank you for sharing this information with me, that can demonstrate gratitude, which is really important towards building relationship. How is this situation affecting you or your loved one? That's the background, and it's important for two reasons. A, it allows the person to identify for themselves what might be underlying emotion and need that they have that's being demonstrated through this experience. And they also gives them the opportunity to clarify that with the staff members so they can understand the context behind why they feel this way. That information is, again, helpful for a better understanding and building relationship. And it also gives the opportunity for the staff member by simply by just saying that this information is helpful to hear, validates what they're feeling, and that's so important. So again, some of the actions that were taken. To your knowledge, how has the staff and others at the home responded to you so far? This again can give an opportunity for the staff to better understand what's been addressed and what hasn't, so they can fill in the areas that need to be filled in and confirm what has taken place, so that everyone's playing on the same understanding. And this, again, I took some notes so I can share them with you, is reassuring the family member that you've truly listened to them. And I know that in the word cloud and what Samantha was referring to, the absolute need for reassurance at this time, it's really important that through simple communication, we demonstrate that. And the final ones to look at here, what ideas do you have for working together with staff and others at the home about this situation, is inviting them to say, we want to hear from you. What ideas do you have? This comes from their recommendation of what they need. And this particular one is they wanted to make a plan to connect regularly. And if we go to the next slide, we ask what other information staff and others from the home would you like to get? They're able to further clarify what their request is that they have someone contact them immediately with the information that they need. By clarifying and confirming what the plan is, by clarifying the information you heard and confirming what it is you're going to do in response to it, it absolutely builds that trust towards this person saying that I'm not just speaking at someone, but someone's actually heard me and is able to repeat back to me what they're hearing. And we have a plan that we have moving forward. A huge step towards, again, starting to build that trust. If we go to the next slide. So again, we're very excited. We would like to have this up and ready to be available for access by family members, as well as it wouldn't be a bad idea to have staff be able to view it as well, to understand it. We'll have it up and ready in this month, in June. We've done a lot of talking about how we can support families and what we can offer them as far as communication with staff. But now I'd also like to put it forward to you all. What skills would you desire to see that would support your teams and how they can respond to family needs. So I'd like to hear from you. So we can see here clearly we're touching on validation and empathy, active listening. Again, we see being objective and a structured format. So these are all very appropriate and addressed in this particular module for families, but also in the following modules that we have for staff. Thank you for sharing that. One of the, we've created a suite of modules that run each about 10 minutes. So the whole suite would run you about an hour, that touch on various aspects of training staff to reinforce skills to be able to interact with families who are in distress. You can see that they touch on some of the things that we see there. We talk about compassionate communication in number 3, depersonalizing family distress, how to collaboratively plan with the family and let them know that this is a co-creation of the process. You can see in the first example there, it says that they'll demonstrate, for example, in a 10-minute module, there'll be an ineffective scenario. There'll be a simple activity for them to practice and then try to incorporate to make the scenario more effective. There's more discussion here that looks at some of the techniques used in the actual e-modules that incorporate things like mindfulness and mindful breathing or emotional regulation. And we try to train and teach and impart these skills using simulated video and scripted responses and experiential learning scenarios so that the learner is doing things in real time to incorporate. I'd like to now pass it back to Sam.
Great. So we've heard a lot about reassurance, kind of seems to be the theme of this. And Daniel's walked through some education on how to do that. When we break down reassurance, here's what we hear from families. Proactive, regular, person-centered, clear language. So these are some of the big things. So we have created some tools that you can use as staff to sort of hold up your end of the bargain. So here's suggestions. So the Keeping Families in the Loop is a companion document to incorporate what we see here on the right. We also have a quick 10 document, which may be on a following slide. That's designed for staff to use. So this will help you identify questions to answer in advance. And these are things where put it up on your website, have a regular email that goes out. We've heard when you wait for the monthly billing, that's a little bit too soon, or sorry, too late for families to get information. So consider how to bridge those gaps, because that's what will reassure families. Speak to them in their language. So explain exactly what's happening in clear language, do it proactively, use tools that you have, and put yourself in those families' shoes and think, what would I need to know? Right, so we've got more tips on communicating with families, so asking for their input. So if you have a family council, ask them. Ask, how can we communicate best with you? So break it down. Is it email? Is it robocalls? Whatever it is, meet the expectations as well. So if you say you're going to do something twice a week, do it. Use the Quick 10 tool and you can just sort of fill in the blanks. That's the information that you want to send out. So if you have a family council, consider how to enable them to still do their work during the pandemic. It's an abrupt change for them as well. Your councils aren't coming into your homes right now. They can't. They can still continue to do their work and support you and support the family members. So consider if you can invite people to opt in to share emails with the council. Use a blind carbon copy function when sending out that invitational email. So figure out how to enable connection while still respecting the privacy and the confidentiality of your families. It's a big concern. Think about the potential for meeting sort of both sides of that equation. But an effective family counselor right now can actually help you do your job better, and it can take some of the strain off of home staff for answering calls about the same information. So about the general state of what's happening in the home. Use that proactive communication that we've outlined, and think about how to work with your family council so that they can continue to help you out through this.